Ladies and gentlemen, you will now bear witness as the candidates of Class 007-14 learn what branch of the officer corps in which they will serve. Across the Army, officers are branched in one of the 16 basic branches. The maneuver, fires, and effects branches consist of infantry, armor, engineer, military police, chemical, field artillery, and air defense artillery. The operations support branches are signal and military intelligence. The four sustainment branches are transportation, ordnance, quartermaster, adjutant general, and finance. The process by which officer candidates are branched involves an in-depth assessment of their physical and academic performances, leadership potential, and leveraging of their talent. This is a painstaking process with the goal of placing the right person with the right branch at the right time. Despite the specific skill sets of each branch, all officers serve the same purpose, and that is to be agile and adaptive leaders who serve our Army at war while taking care of our soldiers, civilians, and Army families.
All right, let's take it out. Here we go. First one, get fired up.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Bullock, and I choose Military Intelligence.
I am OC, Officer Candidate Intermediate, Satellite, and I choose quartermaster.
All right. Might have to redo the OML then. All right, everybody.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Santana, Branch Military Intelligence, Branch Detail, Infantry.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Plank, and I choose Ordnance.
Officer Candidate Mockman, I choose Infantry.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Miller, and I choose Military Intelligence Branch Detail Armor.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Kelly, and I choose Military Intelligence Branch Detail Field Artillery.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Davis, and I branch Signal Corps.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Quarter, and I branch Adjutant General.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Snow. I branch Military Intelligence.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Bell, I branch Signal.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Barry, and I choose Military Intelligence Branch Detail Infantry.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Purchin. I choose infantry.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Hassan, and I branch Military Intelligence. I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Turner, and
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Palmer, and I branch Engineer.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Stroop, and I select Quartermaster.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Newborn, and I select Military Police.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Clark, and I select Military Police.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Santiago, and I select Quartermaster.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Larson. I select Chemical.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Endicott, and I choose Infantry.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Walls, and I choose Infantry.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Wilson, and I choose Engineering.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Soto, and I choose Armor.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Bahlier. I branch Engineer. I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Cersei, and I branch Infantry.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Sonis, and I branch Chemical.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Wajil, and I choose infantry.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Irizarry, and I choose armor.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate McMillan, and I choose ordnance.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Whitfield, and I choose infantry.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Dennis, and I choose ordnance.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Van Dyke, and I branch transportation.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Donatelli, and I choose field artillery.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Washington, and I choose Signal Branch Detail Infantry. I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Thomas, and I branch transportation.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Carter. I choose military intelligence, branch detail, infantry.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Leno, and I choose branch transportation.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Rivera, and I choose ordnance.
And take the one finance off. All right, it's all invalidated. Line up again. No, not a joke? No, not fun? I'm kidding.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Judd, and I choose ordnance. am Intermediate Officer Candidate Morales, and I branch Field Artillery.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Fox Road, and I branch Adjutant General, Branch Detail, Field Artillery. I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Shaw, and I choose Engineer. I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Moffitt, and I choose Air Defense Artillery. I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Meyer, and I choose Air Defense Field Artillery.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Neat, and I choose Field Artillery.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Trumpfeller, and I choose Field Artillery.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Clark, and I choose Finance, Branch Detail, Infantry.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Hampton, and I choose AG, Branch Detail, Infantry.
My name is Intermediate Candidate O.C. Rooms, and I select Signal Corps Field Artillery. Take it off.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Abdullah, and I branch Quartermaster.
Zero it out, Sergeant Rivera.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Abernathy, and I branch Signal Corps.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Akani, and I choose Signal Corps.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Quindy, and I branch Engineer. I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Babb, and I branch Infantry.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Baden, and I branch Adjutant General.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Barker, and I branch Engineering.
I choose engineering.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Berger, and I branch engineer.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Bingley, I choose signal.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Brackenhoff, and I choose infantry.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Branham. I choose field artillery.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Bracington. I choose transportation.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Bryant, and I choose chemical.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Butler, and I choose quartermaster. I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Buck, and I choose infantry.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Cardenas, and I choose engineer.
I am Intermediate Officer Captain Troy, and I branch military intelligence.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Cogdill, and I branch quartermaster.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Cole. I choose chemical.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Kogerbees, and I choose military intelligence.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Chris, and I branch chemical.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate DeVitas, and I choose transportation.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Donaldson, and I choose quartermaster.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Dutton, and I choose finance.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Edlow, and I branch signal.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Boydton, and I branch transportation, spearhead of logistics.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Alaska, and I branch chemical.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Hewlett, and I choose military intelligence.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Hill, and I branch chemical.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Horde. I'm branch adjutant general.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Houchins Boycourt, and I branch ordnance.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate House, and I choose quartermaster.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate James, and I choose signal.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Johnson, and I choose aviation.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Johnson, and I branch military intelligence.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Chablanc, and I branch military intelligence.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Hidalgo, and I branch engineer.
I'm Intermediate
Intermediate Officer Candidate Catalinas, and I branch engineer.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Kerr, and I branch military intelligence.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Kwok, and I branch ordnance.
I am I am intermediate officer candidate Wayne, and I branch engineer.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Lane, and I choose ordnance.
I'm intermediate officer candidate Leathers, and I branch field artillery.
Intermediate officer candidate Lewis, I branch military intelligence.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Machi, and I choose engineer. I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Deki, and I choose engineer.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Manderly, and I branch field artillery.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate McCartney, I branch field artillery.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate McKevitt, and I branch finance.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate McPhail, and I choose infantry.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Michael, branch engineer.
Intermediate officer Miller, I choose transportation.
I'm intermediate officer candidate Montgomery, I choose quartermaster.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Napier, and I branch field artillery.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Gervasi, and I'm branching infantry.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Wood, and I branch quartermaster.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate O'Donnell, and I branch field artillery.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Otis, and I branch military intelligence.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Park, and I branch chemical. I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Payne, I branch engineer.
I am Intermediate Officer Candidate Phelan, and I'm branching military police.
I'm Intermediate Officer Porter, and I branch engineer.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Powder, and I branch signal. Intermediate Officer Candidate Pryor, and I branch military police.
Intermediate Officer Guapi, and I'm branching engineer. Intermediate Officer Candidate Rakes, and I chose military police.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Rangel, and I branch transportation.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Rangel, and I branch signal.
Intermediate officer candidate Rollins, and I branch chemical.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Reineke, and I branch transportation.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Robertson, and I branch quartermaster.
Candidate Russell, and I branch quartermaster.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Sagne, and I branch Signal.
I'm Intermediate Phase Officer Candidate Saunders, and I branch Adjutant General.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Schmitz, and I branch infantry.
Candidate Schwartner, and I branch military intelligence.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Scott, and I am branch Adjutant General.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Sexton. I branch military intelligence. Officer Candidate Chiu, and I branch infantry.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Stafford, and I branch military intelligence.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Stevenson, and I branch field artillery.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Stoner. I branch military police.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Seiko, and I choose quartermaster.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Turco, and I choose engineer.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Waller, and I choose infantry.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Walsh, and I choose Adjutant General.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Warhurst, and I choose transportation.
Intermediate Officer Candidate Whitfield, and I choose military police.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Wood, I choose ordnance.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Zargan. I choose Quartermaster.
I'm Intermediate Officer Candidate Zelinsky, and I choose signal.
Sir, this concludes the ceremony for tonight. Student first sergeant. Your turn.
On your feet. Left face. File from the left. March.
You have enjoyed the Intermediate Officer Candidate Review and Branching Ceremony of OCS Class 007-14. Thank you for attending.